There's something deeply powerful about the person who chooses silence when they've been provoked, not because they're scared, not because they don't have something to say, but because they've reached a level of clarity where not every battle deserves their energy. And it confuses people, especially the ones who were banking on your reaction. When you stay silent in a moment where they expected you to lash out, chase, beg, or fall apart, it shakes them. They don't understand it because they don't realize silence can be louder than noise. We live in a world that rewards outrage. Drama gets attention, reactions go viral, and people have gotten used to equating volume with strength. But the truth is, real strength often doesn't announce itself. It just stands tall, says nothing, and watches everything shift. That kind of power, it comes from within. It's the kind of power you grow into when you've been broken before, but this time you choose not to break. This time you choose to protect your peace instead of proving your point. It's not that you didn't feel the disrespect. You did. You saw the way they tried to chip away at your confidence, quietly doubting you behind your back, hoping you'd fall so they could feel taller. But you chose not to meet them where they left you. You chose elevation. And that choice, that's where everything changes. Because silence isn't emptiness. Silence is space, space to reflect, space to realign, space to let go without losing yourself in the chaos. When you go silent, you shift the power dynamic. The person who holds the most power in a conversation is not the one shouting, it's the one who doesn't need to. It's the one who knows that dignity doesn't need defense, that peace doesn't beg for permission to exist. You see, the moment you stop reacting to the chaos around you, you start regaining control of the calm within you. And that calm, that's intimidating because now they don't know what you're thinking. They can't predict your next move. And deep down, they know. They lost access to your energy the moment you stopped explaining yourself. The silence becomes their mirror. It reflects their own behavior back to them. And some people can't handle that. They wanted you to break. They wanted you to lash out so they could call you unstable or weak or dramatic, but you didn't. And that unsettles them. It's not about revenge. It's about evolution. You're not staying silent to manipulate anyone. You're staying silent because your growth has made their games irrelevant. You've realized that your energy is sacred, and anyone who tries to drain it doesn't deserve a front row seat to your life. That's not bitterness, it's boundaries. That's not pride, it's protection. It's choosing to keep your soul intact in a world that's constantly trying to tear people down for being sensitive, expressive, or too much. But here's the thing, they never expected you to get quiet and grounded. They thought if they pulled away, you'd chase. If they disrespected you, you'd argue. If they cut you off, you'd come running with an apology. But instead, you went still. You went inward. You started healing. And now that silence they mistook for weakness, it's your armor. It's your declaration that you're no longer available for emotional chaos. And it's not easy. Staying silent doesn't mean you don't want to speak your truth. It doesn't mean you're okay with how things went down. It just means you've realized that sometimes the most healing thing you can do is to stop talking and start listening to yourself, to what you actually feel, to what you actually want, and most importantly, to what no longer deserves your energy. Some people will never understand the damage they caused because they were too focused on controlling the narrative. But your silence makes it impossible for them to keep spinning the story. They'll notice the shift. They'll feel the void. And it'll hit them that the access they once had to you was a privilege they misused. Let them feel that absence. Let them sit in the consequences of their choices. You don't need to be cruel. You don't need to be loud. Just be gone in the ways that matter. Because at some point, you realize that being misunderstood is a small price to pay for protecting your peace. You stop trying to explain yourself to people who only listen to respond, not to understand. You stop replaying the conversations in your head, trying to figure out what you could have said differently. You stop needing closure from people who were never open, and instead you give yourself the freedom to walk away, not bitter, not broken, just better. The truth is, you didn't break. You just stopped breaking yourself to be understood by people who weren't capable of seeing you clearly. And now your silence isn't emptiness, it's a boundary. It's a declaration. It's you saying, I'm no longer entertaining what doesn't nourish me. And if that makes people uncomfortable, let them be uncomfortable. Let them sit in the silence. Let them wonder. Let them watch. Sometimes the silence after the storm is the most haunting part, not because nothing is being said, but because everything is being felt. That's what people don't realize when you go silent. It's not because you've given up. It's because you've chosen to rise above. And that kind of stillness, it speaks volumes. When they thought you'd break, they were expecting a version of you that no longer exists. The one that would argue, the one that would over-explain, the one that couldn't sleep because of a text that never came. That version of you might have bent for the sake of keeping peace, even when your own spirit was breaking in the process. But now you've learned. And the moment you chose silence over chaos, you were no longer playing their game. You were rewriting the entire rulebook. The truth is, we've all had moments where we were underestimated, where people thought their absence would ruin us, where they thought their silence would starve us of validation, but they didn't realize some of us grow stronger in the quiet. Some of us come back wiser, softer, but sharper. Because silence isn't just a lack of words, it's the presence of growth. It's you choosing peace even when your heart is still healing. They thought you'd come crawling back. They thought your silence meant weakness. What they missed is that your silence is actually a shield. It's the space where you reclaim your power, piece by piece. And while they were busy assuming you were sitting there shattered, you were actually rebuilding, stronger, clearer, more intentional than ever before. You see, people who try to break you always overestimate their importance in your story. They think you can't go on without them, that you need them to feel whole. But what they don't understand is that your value was never tied to their presence. And once you realize that, you became unstoppable. Because when you finally grasp that your peace matters more than anyone's validation, you stop waiting for apologies, you stop needing explanations. And you definitely stop performing for people who can't see your worth. There's a kind of freedom in realizing you don't owe anyone your energy, that you don't have to entertain drama just because someone else is uncomfortable with your silence. When you stop responding, when you stop trying to fix everything, people notice. And the ones who once fed off your reaction suddenly don't know what to do, because now you're not begging, you're not chasing, you're not explaining, you're simply living. And your peace, it becomes untouchable. It's wild how silence can become the loudest response. It forces people to look inward, to question their actions, to wonder why the same energy they used to drain no longer reacts. And while they're sitting in that discomfort, you're healing, you're reflecting, you're rediscovering parts of yourself that you gave away too freely. You're realizing you don't need closure from someone who was never open, that you don't need to go back to the same fire that burned you just to prove you're not afraid. They thought the ending of the relationship, the friendship, the job, the chapter would break you. But instead, you chose transformation. You chose stillness over struggle. You chose to walk away, not because you were weak, but because you finally knew your worth. That shift, that's the beginning of real power. When you stop dancing for approval, when you stop overextending for people who never clapped for you, you get to pour that energy back into yourself. And no, it's not easy. There are days the silence feels heavy, days when the absence of their presence echoes louder than you'd like to admit. But those are the same days you get to remind yourself, healing doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's just sitting in your own company and realizing you're actually okay. You're breathing, you're standing, and little by little, you're becoming someone you never imagined you could be. They didn't think you'd survive without them, but here you are. Not just surviving, but learning how to thrive. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. It was you choosing not to waste your voice where it won't be valued. It was you learning that being misunderstood is bearable if it means protecting your peace. And now, You don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them the version of you that needed their validation to feel enough. Let them wonder. Let them question why you're no longer available for the drama. Let them feel the shift. Because the truth is, your silence was never about them. It was always about you reclaiming your voice by choosing not to use it on people who never deserved it in the first place. Let your silence say what your words no longer need to. There comes a point in your life when you realize not everyone who claps for you is truly cheering. Some are just waiting, watching to see if you'll fall. It's a hard truth, but it's necessary, because when you stop pretending that everyone around you has good intentions, you start building your strength, not from validation, but from clarity. And that clarity, it changes everything. The people who tried to break you, they didn't just want you to fall. They wanted to feel powerful in your collapse. That's the part they'll never say out loud. They fed on your insecurities, your doubt, your need for approval. And when you started pulling away, when you started showing signs of growth they couldn't control, that's when they turned colder. That's when the silent competition started. But here's the twist. They weren't just underestimating you, they were projecting their own limits onto your life. What they didn't expect was for you to stop explaining yourself. They didn't expect you to protect your peace like it's sacred. They didn't expect you to stay silent, to let them speak all they want while you just kept showing up with your actions. That kind of maturity, that kind of quiet power, it terrifies people who only know how to communicate through chaos. You want to know what's more powerful than defending yourself? Leveling up without saying a word. Letting your glow up be your response. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you've outgrown the need to prove anything. You no longer need the last word, the final post, the emotional paragraph explaining your side. You've realized not everyone deserves access to your truth. Some people are just committed to misunderstanding you, no matter how much you clarify. So let them talk. Let them gossip, assume, misinterpret, judge. While they're stuck in the same cycle of drama and bitterness, you'll be outgrowing the space you once shrank yourself to fit in. That's the evolution they never saw coming. You're not proving them wrong to make a point. You're simply living in your purpose, and the contrast speaks for itself. Every time you choose not to engage, not to retaliate, not to chase their attention, you're investing in your future. You're putting your energy into healing, creating, building, not reacting. And even though it's hard, because let's be honest, silence takes more strength than shouting, you're becoming more powerful with every moment you refuse to play small again. They thought you'd break, but you didn't. You bent, maybe. You stumbled. You cried behind closed doors. But you didn't break. And now that you're walking forward, even if it's slow, even if you're still carrying pieces of your old self, you unstoppable. Because the moment you understood, your silence wasn't emptiness, but empowerment. You stopped needing closure from the very people who couldn't give it to you. Let them watch. Let them wonder how you're still standing. Let them feel the distance you created, not out of spite, but out of necessity. You're not being cold. You're being clear. You're not isolating yourself. You're elevating. And not everyone is meant to come with you, especially not the ones who only clapped when you were small enough to control. The most powerful version of you is the one that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. It's the version that smiles in silence, protects their peace fiercely, and understands that not every battle is worth your voice. You've started to realize that the real glow up isn't just about changing your appearance. It's about changing your energy. And once your energy shifts, you'll notice who starts to fall away. That's not rejection. That's alignment. They didn't expect you to outgrow them. They didn't expect you to evolve. But what they really didn't expect was for you to stop needing their applause. And when you no longer need the validation of those who tried to dim your light, that's when your power becomes undeniable. You're no longer fighting for a seat at a table where your worth wasn't recognized. You're building your own. one choice, one boundary, one silent rise at a time. They underestimated the fire you were building in your silence. They didn't see the work you were doing behind the scenes. They didn't hear the prayers, the self-talk, the nights you chose healing over revenge. But now that you're glowing in a peace they didn't give you, your silence says everything it needs to. And when they finally look up and realize you're no longer the same person they tried to break, they'll get the message without a word. The moment you start winning quietly, something incredible happens. Your focus sharpens, your peace deepens, and the noise around you starts to fade. That's not a coincidence. That's what happens when you stop proving yourself to people who were never rooting for you. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't scream weakness, it echoes strength. Because when you're truly focused on rising, you don't have time to convince anyone that you're worthy. You just build, you grow, you evolve. And those who tried to break you, they'll hear about it. They'll see it in your eyes, in your energy, in your stillness. There's a kind of power that comes from staying quiet while you heal, while you create, while you become. It's not that you don't have things to say. It's that you've realized the most powerful moves are made in silence. You've learned that not everything needs to be shared. Not every setback needs to be explained. Not every win needs to be broadcasted. Because when you're really focused on growth, your only competition is the version of you that used to settle for less. This isn't about being secretive. It's about being selective. You've seen what happens when you share too much with people who don't understand you. You've felt the sting of letting the wrong people into your process. That disappointment taught you something. Your journey isn't meant for public consumption. It's sacred. And when something is sacred, you protect it. You nurture it. You don't throw it into the noise for likes or approval. You let it mature in the quiet, away from judgment, away from pressure. They expected you to fall apart loudly. They expected your breakdown to be visible, dramatic, public. But what they didn't expect was your silent rebuild. They didn't anticipate that you would take your pain, your lessons, your heartbreak, and turn it into fuel. They thought their absence would ruin you. Instead, it refined you. They thought their silence would destroy you. Instead, it centered you. That's the kind of transformation that only happens when you stop trying to prove anything and start living like you have nothing to prove. You stopped entertaining people who only show up when it benefits them. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped shrinking to make others feel comfortable. That wasn't arrogance. That was clarity. And clarity is what gave you the confidence to focus on your own lane, to pour into your own peace, and to stop waiting for people to notice your worth. You already know your value. That's why you can be silent now. That's why you don't flinch when people leave. That's why you don't explain when they question your distance. Because you're not building for their applause, you're building for your own evolution. The people who once underestimated you will have to witness your transformation from a distance. And that's the best part. You don't have to say a word. Your energy, your healing, your presence will speak for you. You're not trying to make them regret losing you. That's not your mission anymore. You're too busy becoming someone they could never break again. And here's what they really didn't see coming, that you would rise in silence and glow in peace. That your comeback would be soft, internal, powerful, that you wouldn't need revenge because your evolution would be enough. You've outgrown revenge. You've outgrown petty battles. You've outgrown the need to be seen in rooms that only celebrated your brokenness. Now you celebrate yourself, quietly, fierce, consistently. They might never say it out loud, but they'll notice. They'll notice that you're happier, that you're lighter, that you don't react like you used to. And that silence, that smile, that glow they didn't give you, that's the evidence of everything you built in the dark. You learn to love yourself in private. You learn to heal in private. And now you walk differently, talk differently, move differently, not because you're better than anyone, but because you finally understand who you are. No one can take that away from you. Let them talk, let them wonder, let them think whatever they want. You're not here to explain. You're not here to convince. You're here to grow, to heal, and to quietly build a life that reflects your worth. That's the most powerful thing you can do now. Win quietly, move silently, and let your success make the noise. And when they ask what happened to you, just smile. Let them know you stayed silent and you rose anyway.